circles put together and ironed. You can see that I have put interfacing on the back of every piece, and on some of them I've had to piece the interfacing, but that's not going to be a problem. I am trying to line them up as close together as possible. Even though I cut them all with the same template, it still gave me a little bit of off. And we are going to do some clips here. And I'm just going to put the clips infrequently around the edges, just enough to hold it all together so that I can sew it. And I want to be able to do 1/4 inch seam all the way around. Why I cut my interfacing a little shy is because I wanted to be able to not have interfacing in the seams. If it's in there, I don't really mind, but I just want to make sure that everything is lined up properly. And then because this is all going to be turned out, I'm going to make a little mark on the interfacing, just a really light mark. And I'm going to go over here to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew around these circles. Let me bring you down here so that you can see. We'll sew one circle together. I'll do the other two off camera, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to get them ready to be able to be turned. Sewing machine, I'm going to use the edge of my presser foot as my guide, and I'm going to start sewing around this circle, and I am going to backspace, or backstitch. I should just get over it and call it backspace, right? All right, so here we go. You don't have to go fast. You just want to take it nice and easy. Sew right around your circle. As you can see, here's my little mark that I made. Gave myself a fairly decent opening. You do what works for you in your hands. And just backstitch a couple times, just so that you can have enough room to put your hand in there and turn that. All right, I'm going to sew the other two, and then I'll show you how to clip the edges and how to turn it. Okay, so now that we have all three of them sewn, there are several different ways that you can get this ready to turn out. You can go through and cut notches all the way up to, but not through, your seam line all the way around. That's not really a good option for my hands, but that would be how you do it if you decided you wanted to use little scissors to do that. You can take your regular scissors and go all the way around the edge and trim that seam line down as much as you like, but I'm not really super fond of that way. So what I'm going to do instead, these are called pinking shears, or as my friend Coleen calls them, zigzag scissors. And I'm just going to start right where that opening begins, and I'm going to go around, and I'm just going to trim around the outside of my circle. Best solution I have found for doing something like this. They work pretty quickly. These have big handles on them, which makes them good for my hands. You can lay them flat on the table and trim. I usually pick stuff up, but it's looking like my hands aren't liking it. The only con I have found for these is that pinking shears or zigzag scissors seem to be a little bit heavy. But I am going to trim pretty close to the seam line. And I am not going to trim where the opening is on my little circle. And they do a good job without making too big of a mess. So I'm going to do the next two. I'll speed it up so you guys don't have to see it in real time, but that you can see how these scissors work. If you don't have a pair of these, they're great to have in your arsenal. Maybe your grandma has one she could give you. I think these did come from my grandma. The next step on all of these is just to turn them out. Turning them out is pretty simple. And I interfaced all of mine only because I wanted it to be a little sturdier. You could totally do this without interfacing at all. You have the clips right there to hold them, and then just kind of roll your edges. We will be ironing before we go over to the sewing machine again. And this is such a cute, fast gift, or table item for yourself. The hardest part is cutting the circles. And this one with both sides the same, for me, is going to be the bottom. But you could totally do any colors you wanted. You could do 6 different colors. You could pick 2 fabrics and do like one layer, the top of each layer, one color, and the bottom a different color. You could pick 3 fabrics and make 3 one-color layers. You could pick whatever combination of colors you like. And it turns out pretty well, especially since I painted those edges. It just goes into the circle really easily. 4 clips. The last one to turn out. Get out. The other reason you're doing this is you want to check to make sure that everything, that you didn't have any holes in your seams or any of that. We've all had it happen. I don't think I had it happen on this one, but let's make sure. Pull our last little edges in. Couple clips. Before I sew these, I'm going to press them down. And then all I'm going to do once they're pressed is I'm going to do an 1/8 of an inch top stitch around the top edge of these. So we'll be back when we've top stitched it and ironed them. Okay, so we're going to start here. I've got a center line on this, and I'm going to take my chalk try to make that show up, but it's not. All right, so I'm going to draw a line at the center. And then I'm going to turn my ruler, run that line. I'm going to go 60 degrees. I'm using my protractor to make sure that I get 60 degrees. I'm going to draw a line through the center. These lines will not show. And then I'm going to center my protractor on that line. And I'm going to go 60 degrees again so that it goes through the center. Take the protractor out. And still making sure I'm going through the center. Let me draw another line. So now what I've got is like 6 pieces of pizza. And I'm going to put these together. Just because I don't want my lines to move. And then over here at the sewing machine, I'm going to sew on each of those 3 lines all the way across from side to side. This sewn together with the 60-degree marks. Still finding threads that I've got to cut off. That's okay. We'll get them. Okay, and now we're going to take the 3rd piece, and this is the one where both colors are the same, and we're going to stack it on top of that 3rd piece. Okay, so now that we have all of our layers sewn, I took and put pins at each of the seams. And I put pins there because I want this to be very, very precise on the next section that I cut. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each of these sections and I'm going to make sure that I find the center of that section. And I'm going to make a little mark there. And then you're going to fold this back and you're going to sew in about 2.5 inches on each of those sections. It's going to be a little difficult to do, but it's not super hard. And you don't necessarily have to measure these. You could fold them in half, figure out where it's at. It's so much easier if you use something to measure it for you. Here's my center. And I'm putting a pen to hold down that center section so I don't accidentally sew on it. Now do you see why we pinned it down at the seams? Fold this back, Find your center. There. I'm using a dark colored thread, so none of these pen marks will show. Now that we are over here at the sewing machine, I want you to see my little mark. I'm going to sew on that line, and I'm going to sew as far in as it will let me sew. And just straight in. Two inches, 2.5 inches, something like that should be great. And I sewed I backstitched at both the beginning and the end of each of the seam. Do it again on each of the other pockets. Now what you've got is 2 layers of pockets. We're going to take all the pins out of here. I'm going to go through and trim out all my little threads, and then we'll go to the next step, which involves how do we close this thing and how do we make it stand up to hold our biscuits and our rolls. We'll be back in just a moment. Seams are done. And then, and I'm not sure this is going to show for you, you're going to put your entire piece down here beside itself. And then I'm going to use pens to mark these so you can see it. On the, for me, it's the left. You're going to put 2 male snaps, and I've marked those with that red and white pen. And then in the center of the one 2 over, you're going to put a female snap or rivet. And then to this way, at this edge, you're going to put another snap. On mine, I've just written it in with ink pen, but there are my markings for where my snaps go. And you can do this with anything you like. I am using sew-on snaps, and you need 2 male and 2 female. And the way these work is that you snap them off of here. So male, female, male, female. You can do this any way you like. If you know how to machine stitch this on, then you go right ahead and do that. I'm going to use the pen to hold them in place where I need them to be. And I'm going to do something I'm allergic to. I'm going to hand sew. I'll set that male one over there. This goes here. And I'm just going to take a hand needle and thread, and I'm going to sew my snaps on. Here we have it. This is our roll holder. I sewed on snaps. You could put on rivets, Velcro, ribbon, anything that you want. Then you just tuck your little dinner rolls or biscuits or ornaments or whatever you like down in your little pockets. And you've got all these little places that you can use to keep things warm. And I'll be cutting threads off of this forever. But these are great because you can unsnap where you sewed your snaps in at. Come on, where'd the other one go? And they fold up to little bitty, so you can store them with your Christmas ornaments if you've made this for Christmas. And I should have done a better job of snipping my threads as I was going. But this is part of our vintage handmade holidays for the holiday hop this year. And I really do hope that you'll try to make this. I would love to see pictures of yours. And once again, you can make this out of any fabrics you like. I just used something brighter because I thought, this would be nice to use all year long. And I have a lot of blues and greens in my house. Or I may decide to give it to somebody who's got a more colorful color scheme than I do. You could make this out of, this would be really cute, out of vintage fabrics or Lori Holt fabrics. But thank you for watching, and I appreciate you